as you said, I'd like to talk about sort of simultaneously the city and our personal life, that our journey, as human beings, because they work hand in hand. They're really, you cannot separate these two. In fact, when you think about it, most of us, well, a great proportion of people in the world today live in an urban environment. And that urban environment has kind of replaced the natural environment. And it's continuously transmitting a message to us through all of our senses, which we normally don't think about. We don't pay it any attention, but it's there. It's a message, and it is speaking. Whether it is, and it is also responding to us in a way. It is the result of our actions, and it is creating us as well. So we're very interconnected, the human beings and the city environment. However much we may say we hate it, we don't want it, we love it, whatever, we're just connected. So that's why starting this talk with the title, which are words by my late husband, Nader Khalili: every man and woman is a doctor and a builder to heal and shelter themselves, which I thought was a beautiful quote for today, that we are, right now we're meeting on, it's not Zoom, it's Google Meet, because of COVID. So because of disease, a pandemic, we do need to heal and to shelter ourselves. So would you like to give the next slide? Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, this is, one of our friends, mutual friends and board member, sent this little cartoon that's up in the top left-hand corner. Do you have any long-term goals? Just death. This has been, something that we have all had to contemplate as we've gone into this COVID, is sort of what's at the end of the road and where are we along the way? And we've all, well, speaking for myself, faced fear, panic, and of course, thinking again about the global crisis of, our planet. And then another on the right-hand side, I thought this was a wonderful little sticker I saw somewhere on Facebook or something: clean up your mess, love mother. But, we are in the midst of climate change. One of my big fears was actually 5G networks coming in. And what are we going to do when we have to stay in our houses and we're bombarded by all this radiation? And then in the media, there were all these stories and nobody had any jobs. And we were beginning to feel like Job in the book of Job, with all his sufferings. And of course, in the book of Job, he never lost faith. But we never know from all these stories, what is the truth? What is COVID? Where has it come from? Where is it going? Is there climate change? Isn't there climate change? Why are all these things happening? We are basically in a culture of relative truth. What's the proper philosophical term for that? They apply it to Darwinism a lot, not historical materialism. Anyway, it's a way of thinking where you just push it back one stop. This has come from that, but you don't push it back all the way. And you don't ask, as children might ask, well, what is the cause of all of this? So going along the road, we can look at all the relative causes. And we can also ask, what is the cause of all of this? Is there any unitary point, any cause beyond everything that is also giving us this message? So let's not go to the next slide yet. One of the quotes that was very important to me in this time of COVID was from the Quran, which I've been honored to be part of a translation group. Not that I know neither Arabic nor Quran, but I have been there as a sort of English language checker. So if it makes sense to me, the translation would make sense to anyone. But this was a beautiful verse. And if I paraphrase it, it says something like the links in the chain of our breath going up and down, the Lord has hung the image of our deeds in this life around our necks. So whatever we have done, it is all recorded in our breath and in our cells. And so that clean up your mess is not just for the planet, but it is also for us. Okay, next slide, please. Yes. So there we go. We entered this COVID time and we all got locked in our house. And that was the safe place, which actually it has been the safe place for thousands and thousands of years. Humans have considered it the safe place. The universe is actually a limitless space. And so from time immemorial, humans have put a limit around a certain amount of space in order to be able to conceive of it, to think of it, to understand, where we're at. And those things, I believe, became cities, not today's cities, because we might say that today's cities are more like that sort of, they give us that feeling of infinite chaos, of not knowing where we are. We can't think straight because there's no logic in it. But once you put a limit around a space, then you can start to focus. It gives you focus. So it's actually been a good thing, really. That's home was the safe space, although it's been driving quite a lot of people crazy because we have to self-reflect. But it also puts us in mind of the fact that, that putting a limit, circumscribing the space, has been the way of giving us enough of setting limits, giving us enough of a safe space to begin to self-reflect. And that's what a city has always been about. And so on this slide, you can see in the top right-hand corner is one of the most ancient symbols for city, a crossing and a circular perimeter. And that is actually Aramaic writings from Syria, from a Roman pavement of the era of the Roman Empire in Syria. And on the other side, you can see ancient city now in Balkh in Afghanistan, called Dashli 3 or something, the archaeologists call it. Anyway, it also shows they threw a perimeter around it and then they started to make the buildings. And in the bottom left-hand corner is a miniature of Baghdad, Islamic period miniature, 11th, 12th century, something like that, CE. Again, a square, but it's a perimeter. And then inside all the stuff, the houses, the trees, the this and the that. On the other side is a simple room with a window, you know. Maybe not typical. I don't know if it's typical for the way most people have lived. I lived with my paperwork in the lockdown, and I like to live on the floor. So, and then, you know, kids really know what defining that safe space is, because they're not too far out of mommy's womb, and Barbara Papa makes them feel, you know, then everybody, but I like the Barbara Papa because it shows everybody is doing their own thing in their own little space. But it brings that concept of what, you know, if you circumscribe a space, you have a focus. And the Barbara Papas do it in the round. Most of us live in houses that are in the square, and yet we can still say that there's a focus in there somewhere. We just need to find what it is. So is it a prison or is it a paradise? That depends on us. You know, when I was about 25 years ago, yeah, when I was building earth domes with architect Nada Khalili, we had some clients who were monks, Byzantine Catholic monks, actually, a particular sect. No, they were Coptic, I'm sorry, they were Coptic monks. And they came to lunch in the humble little hut, the site hut that we had. And they came and they saw the earth domes, which they very much wanted for their monks' cells for contemplation. And one of them was fasting. So we served potatoes and no meat products and so on. And then there was an Iranian student there, Farzin, who used to tease everybody. And he said to the monk, "You really want one of these domes because not even the devil can get you in there." So this is the question, is the devil going to get you in there or not? But yeah, that's making space. Now let's go to the next slide and see, after we define the limits, we define a safe space. Okay, this is somehow also related in the way of defining a safe space. And you can see that actually on the top corner that looks like a grid is a refugee camp. Can you believe? This is the way we think of cities these days. It's just sit down, like everything the same. There's no focus, there's no center, there's no perimeter. It's just an infinite grid. And you know, if they had a chance after a while, I'm sure they would all become an infinite grid of high-rise blocks. But it doesn't give us that sense of safe space and reflection. And everything is very mechanized. Now we have 3D printing, which actually I love. So, you know, we also have a machine circumscribing the space. This is the little pump going around to make the space. But the one thing that I discovered in this period is the question of electromagnetic energy and how is that affecting our interior space. I actually bought the equipment on the bottom right-hand side in order to measure the different levels of EMF, because I was very worried about 5G. I thought, I don't want that stuff in my space, especially if I have to stay in there. I want to know how to keep it out. And so I got this equipment and I measured, and sure enough, I found, I was surprised that many things that we'd lived with without thinking about it emitted very high frequency radio waves. Excuse me, I haven't taken the course yet, so I don't know very well the exact language, but I could certainly hear and read the measuring device. And things like your modem, your microwave, very, very high frequency. waves. Some people say they don't damage you. Other people say they get a headache. I personally found when I located all the hotspots, if I then turned off my wireless connection on and off, I could focus, my brain could focus much better. And on the other end of the spectrum, I also got a Rife machine, which is for healing. So the difference between one set of vibrations, if you like, and another set of vibrations. This Rife machine, I have a friend who has MS. You can't see her, but you can see her body in the center. And she said, I just need to put on the Schumann frequency. Schumann frequency is a very relaxing kind of earth frequency, very earthing and very relaxing frequency. And the minute she did it, she's holding the two electrode things in her hands, in her right hand and left hand on the sheet. The minute she did it, her cats, one by one, started to jump on the bed. Like they were so attracted to this, and they were just like purring, and they were glued onto the mattress there. So that was the healing aspect of these frequencies. And that Schumann frequency, the cats knew, you know, they weren't going to sit on her modem, but they were going to sit on when she put the Schumann frequency on. So for healing and for the relation with our buildings and what we can do, there is actually a lot that we can do. But I'm an architect, so I'm going to look at it more from an architectural point of view, but with some thoughts about what we can do within that environment. So that's defining of our safe space, setting our limits. Okay, Isias, please go ahead to the next slide. And being able to focus better, it helps us to candidly face ourselves, our life. And in many ways, it brings us down to earth, or it should do. Maybe the Schumann frequency does. One of the things I found amongst our entire family is that suddenly everybody wanted to grow food. Of course, everybody was a bit panicked, you know, are we going to, you know, is there going to be food shortages? We didn't know in the beginning of all this crisis. And so all of us, including myself, but our extended family, most of whom had never grown anything in their lives and had never shown any interest, were all potting their plants and growing tomatoes and beetroots and onions and sunflowers and all sorts of things. Suddenly everybody was growing. They were all getting their hands in the earth. So I think part of this process is coming down to earth. There's a turning point, which in many religions, this is just called repentance. But anyway, it's a turning to reality and coming down to earth. And part of that is we begin to actually feel a connection with the world outside of ourselves, strangely enough, even though we're inside. This I've just illustrated some historical earth architecture. In the top left-hand corner is the Palace of Ardashir, I think it's called, which was Sasanian era in Greater Iran, which was also Iraq and Mesopotamia. The Sasanians basically had the whole of Mesopotamia. So it's kind of in Mesopotamia, building with earth and building with what you see in the bottom right-hand corner is very, very ancient. They've found a few examples, or one, maybe even only one example, dating to about the 2nd millennium BC of a freestanding arch. But this one is about maybe 2nd, 3rd century AD. So from 2 millennia previously, this had been going on, this building with earth, this masonry building. And this touching the earth, this coming down to earth, and this orientating yourself towards reality, and also towards kind of what is the cause of all of this, and having a focus, has also been addressed by ancient philosophers. When we look at Plato, the Neoplatonists, the Christian philosophers, the Neoplatonist Christian philosophers, theologians, let's say, pre-Islam and then going into Islam, you will see this concept of earth as being, like the alchemists say, the prima materia. The earth is Plato calls it the Ili. It is like a substance, but it's not the tangible substance of earth. It is the substance of the world, or of the soul, or something. I don't know. I don't have the words to express it, but you can see it in the Christian icons from the East. You can see time and again that the environment is described as earth. It's either going to be a mountain, or it's going to be buildings made clearly with masonry. And somehow this space is being opened inside it, that's like a cave, or it's a space. In fact, the ancient Greek word chora has also the meaning of choreo, means to open a space. Chora isn't just a space, it's opening a space in this primal material. So somehow, knowing it or not, I think that we have all been touching this earthen reality, and we have been forced to self-contemplate, and those who have been able to be more at peace with this, I think, may have gained something from it. I certainly feel that I have, that it's brought me more down to earth, and a lot of my stupid dreams have gone. They say when you get very sick, I had a friend who had breast cancer. She said, well, the first thing that happened to me is I realized what was on my bucket list and what wasn't. And she said, you know, a lot of stuff just didn't seem important anymore, and I let it go. So a turning point is, now here's something very beautiful that a 20th century philosopher wrote. He is called Gaston Bachelard. He was a French philosopher. He was actually the University of the Sorbonne in Paris. The top really was and probably maybe still is the top university in Paris. They created the chair of the philosophy of science for him, because he was a scientist, but he turned more towards poetry and the 4 elements, earth, water, air, and fire, as it is in the Western European tradition. And he meditated a lot on the relationship between the human and the material through poetics. So he describes what he calls images of matter in the work of great poets and prose writers. And I'm going to quote you a couple of his quotes. He says, "Yet besides the images of form so often evoked by psychologists of the imagination, there are, as I will show, images of matter, images that stem directly from matter. The eye assigns them names, but only the hand truly knows them. A dynamic joy touches, molds, and refines them. When forms, mere perishable forms and vain images, perpetual changes of surfaces, are put aside, these images of matter are dreamt substantially and intimately. They have weight, they constitute a heart. That is from his book, Water and Dreams. And he also says in the same book, meditated upon from the perspective of its depth, matter is the very principle that can dissociate itself from forms. Meditation on matter cultivates an open imagination. So with an open imagination, let's go to the next slide and take a look. And this, in a way, this open imagination is a kind of turning point for a person. So yeah, one of the things that we've seen happening actually with this shedding of what's not necessary, as my friend said when she got her breast cancer, is that people have been helping each other more. I find in where I'm living in London, I think people have been helping each other more. And the other day, I finally went out, because I am also sheltering my parents, so I don't go out as much as others perhaps. I finally went out to go to the library. I wasn't going to take a bus. I decided I would walk. I hadn't been in the city for too long. So I walked over an hour to go to the library. And the second day I went, it was raining. But I realized certain ways in which the buildings and the architects had generously helped the man on the street. There was a shop there, you can see Heels or something. They just made a little arcade piece on the ground, and it was such a relief to just pop in under that cover of the arcade and walk down there and come out, because for a couple of minutes I didn't have rain. And I thought, yeah, if we were all helping others, if we all had this attitude of helping others and providing a little bit more, we could have a paradise. The bikes now are all provided in the city. And then traditionally, you look, dry cultures have provided little water fountains in the street, fed by natural springs. The shops now, the lucky people are not in those high rises where you can't open your windows. They're little shops that they leave the door open. So they're being more accommodating. I went into Boots, they didn't bother to leave the door open. They had an automatic door that closed the minute the customer came in. They made sure only 8 customers, and you were closed in there with 8 other customers. But with all these little shops, they just kept the door open. They were maybe spending a little more on heating, I don't know, so that their customers could go in and out and feel more comfortable about what they were breathing and so on. Lots of places like that, all the pavements accommodating more people sitting. So I began thinking, this attitude of helping others, well, it can start within our own space, because if we are having this relationship with our house, if the matter itself is something that we see as alive, we should be helping each other. And of course, we are helping others in our own home. And we can start by simply looking at, if you open one window, how does it affect the rest of the house? It does. Where you put your heating will affect how it travels around. It doesn't have to be all these domes and vaults that I've been used to building. It's not as simple a kind of philosophical and physical picture if you're in all the square rooms that we all live in, but still, there is a focus to your house. There is a movement of heat and air and bringing the sun in, warming things up. So a lot of things, even when we're confined to the house, we can certainly learn and we can certainly help others. And we can also, I think, understand better that this principle of helping others is so far-reaching. We're always taught just to help ourselves. But the paradoxical thing is, as soon as one helps someone else, the blessing seems to come. Doesn't matter, it comes from somewhere else, perhaps. So when you open the window, you know, and the coolness actually comes from your basement instead of from the window, because the air is moving from there or something. Well, that's a little backwards actually, but anyway, I guess you get the principle. You know, it helps us to have an open mind and to experiment with our mindset. And the house is a wonderful place to do it because there's so much to learn. You know, when I was a child, our house always had very badly fitting windows, and because it's an old house, it's 150 years old, and we didn't have heating in a lot of the rooms. And I remember I used to go to bed and I would watch the lampshade in the middle of the room hanging down and gently swaying in the breeze, which we didn't appreciate that. And now I appreciate it. And I think, well, this is great. You know, if we could just have a heating source in the middle, then we could let the air flow a bit on the edges. Or if you're on the Indian subcontinent, why would you even bother to adopt all these high-rise buildings and enclosed spaces? The most beautiful parliament building of Bangladesh, which I had the great pleasure of being able to go to, was designed by Louis Kahn, and it actually doesn't have windows as such. I mean, it has windows, but they're not tight-fitting glass windows. It doesn't have air conditioning. It's just designed in such a way that it stays cool. So we're not in need of these. We're not in need of, you know, such changes don't have to be an absolute revolution. They're just a change in the way we think and how we decide to help others with our work. And this photo up here was on the top right hand. It's just a sudden appreciation of things you might pass every day, but you realize are so beautiful and simply give to others by their beauty, you know. So, in fact, we may feel that it's a sacrifice helping others, but in actual facts, that helps ourselves. Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yes, change the slide. Yeah, that one is just the universal elements and some of the different systems that civilizations have used, which have many overlaps, for elements of the world and elements of the human nature and elements of the divine nature. They're just elements, really. The one on the left-hand side at the top is the European earth, water, air and fire. As I was saying, with Gaston Bachelard, has wonderful work on the poetics of these different elements through well-known authors in France. The one, okay, we've seen that picture of the hand in the earth. The one with the Allah in Arabic in the middle is all the 99 names of Allah, God, in the Islamic Quran. And on the far, I believe it, on the far right, I believe it's a Tibetan mandala, but in any case, it is a Buddhist mandala, again with the elements, the directions, the different qualities, the different deities, which are part of their system of thinking. So there is within tradition systems of thinking which can take the human being from their humble and incomplete earthly selves up the ladder, if you like, to the divine Godhead, and back down again, because as we just saw, we do need to come back down to earth as well. We live on this earth. I chose the lower slide because Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, as it was Constantinople, and actually it's called Constantinople in the Quran, by the way. It has these 4 archangels, and there's all this debate right now. Should it be a mosque? Should it be a church? It can't be a church because it's not owned by the church, but should it be a mosque, etc., etc.? Should everybody try and pray there? So I thought to myself, well, there's 2 very interesting things about this picture. First of all, these are the original archangels that were there, and they do have connotations of earth, water, air, and fire. And secondly, in the middle, it probably is those 99 names. I am not sure. And then the radiating lines, they do figure in early Christian theology, like Dionysus the Pseudo-Areopagite, and also pre-Christian, Plotinus. They speak about the center and the rays. And in fact, this is in every tradition. You're going to find this figure of the center and the radiating lines to the perimeter. So from the unity of the creator to the multiplicity of the creation. And here you have it beautifully laid out for you, but you can see these are fairly universal concepts, and they're concepts that we can discover in our own house. It doesn't have to look like Hagia Sophia, but it's still there. Anyway, Isias, go ahead, next one. So it helps us to this thinking and just playing with the house and understanding what we can do now to cut our bills, improve the heating and cooling, improve the enjoyment of the house, grow more plants on the house. I have someone working with me now. I don't think we've got the money to build. I know we haven't got the money to build it right now, but you never know. You have to start something. We have someone designing, drawing up a greenhouse on the top of a terraced house, because if you put a greenhouse on the roof of a terraced house, you get all the sun you need to grow everything, and then you can pipe the warm air in with a little bit of understanding of the water condensation and so on. So instead of the loft, we could have a greenhouse up there. So a lot of things that we feel are unrelated. This is a design principle that has even been used in very top-level design, industrial design groups in the US. I'm just slowing down and searching in my mind for the name of the 2 authors. They wrote a book, and they called the method, they called it Synectics, meaning to put together several seemingly unrelated things, but they used it in industrial design. For instance, Esnada Khalili always used to tell that story, which I haven't mentioned. He used to tell a story about how they were trying to design, those sort of squeegee bottles that you get honey in. And they wanted to design it so you could squeeze out the honey and not have the bottle all sticky at the end. And they had, a guy who understood plastics, and a man who understood bees, and then a man who was a zoologist. And they put their heads together and they were brainstorming, and the zoologist said, well, I think we need to look at how the horse goes to the toilet, because he doesn't have one opening, he has 2. So from that, apparently, came the unlikely combination came the unlikely result of the way all those jam and honey bottles are configured. They have two little caps on the top so that it never gets dirty on the outside. So this putting seemingly unrelated things together and seeking out the unity is something that our brain often finds it hard to do. And we have to let go of that and kind of just get into the swim of things. That's why their technique of putting these people together, because every person's brain had this different set of experiences. Once they got brainstorming and they wanted all to help each other out with the solution, they found themselves able to have a more open mind and adopt pieces from each other. But if we look at it just from ourselves as individuals, and we look at the relation with my favorite subject, masonry, earth architecture, I wanted to bring this slide to your attention because of a very interesting thing I've recently discovered in my PhD studies between visual and experienced. There are philosophers like René Guénon, for instance. He talks about this. The center is it's a figure for it's an arithmetical figure for number one, but it's also beyond arithmetic, because the center can also be beyond the physical center. It has that capacity. Well, when a mason is building a dome, even when a machine builds it, like the one on the top, you set a central point. Someone has to set that central point. There is something before the center. And you see the mason building that brick dome. You actually see me in the background, also working on it in my younger years, with nothing but gravity to hold it up. Those bricks that are hanging down are actually an interesting weight that you put the brick with the mortar on the surface, and that brick has another one bigger on the outside that's dragging it outwards. So it sticks there for long enough. It sticks there really just up there in space due to gravity, gravity against gravity. But the sensation that a mason has when they're building a dome or a vault, of course the machine doesn't have a sensation, but the reality is still there, is that point at the center where I think you can see at the very bottom of this slide, you can see where this rotating compass line is hinged. So the sensation that the mason has is that that point is like a gravitational attraction point. Everything is deriving from that point. And if he dares to put the brick off a little this way, that way, he feels the weight. But if he puts it right on line with respect to that central point, there's a sort of weightlessness to it. That dome builds itself. So what I saw in the church that I was studying for Hagia Sophia in Thessaloniki is that there is a visual center and there is a gravitational center. And that's very much like us as human beings. That visual center is when the mason gets to the top of going round and round and round, he puts the last brick in the middle there. Like you see this flower going around, or you see those, what are they called? They're made in the cornfields, the circles.
Crop circles.
Crop circles. He puts the last brick in, tack, there's a point there. And the iconographers have elaborated that. We saw in Hagia Sophia, the Ottomans, they replaced it with all the names of God. The Christians, they present the human, the divine human, as a figure, but in this case, this one is going back to God. It's in the ellipsis, ascension. So it's going up into that point beyond everything, into God, basically. So they're presenting the circumscribed God. But nevertheless, this is visual logic. This is visual and intellectual. This is the intellectual level of that building. But it's not the gut feeling level. It's not the experience. The experience level, even for the person who has not built it, is right there at that point, which was where the compass was, center of the compass, which built this whole thing. And from there is hanging the chandelier that lights up the building, that is directly over the omphalos stone, which means the belly button, to the earth. So from heaven to earth, whatever. But that point, that is the point, which in us probably is our heart, but it is a place of experience. And that's why I'm trying to make this point, the difference between our intellectual experience of things and our felt experience. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm going a little over time, but this is the next one. So that felt experience, when we have an open mind, we just go through the process of whatever it is life is taking us through, we actually can begin to understand that what we need is right here. Maybe it takes a little work, maybe it's presented to us, but it is here. In London, those beautiful squares, they're an ideal model for sustainable development, actually. I mean, they may be this, I think that one is Berkeley Square. It may be, I think it's the American Embassy down at the bottom right-hand corner, but it's the ideal model, and it's a courtyard. It's the courtyard house that's become a public space, but it still has that quality of being able to be a semi-private or a controlled space that everybody's thinking about now with COVID. How can you filter who you're going to let into your house, who you're not, etc. And so on every level, if we really contemplate it, I think we can find, we just need to change our minds and find that it's right here. That super adobe that maybe you've seen, this sandbag shelter type of construction, that was not a Khalili's kind of aha moment, is that we were in the desert. We had a piece of land where there was no clay, so he couldn't do all the ceramic houses that he wanted to do and had proposed to people before. But with the addition of some sacks that you didn't even have to cut the tubing and make sacks. You just bought it from the factory before they even made the sacks, and you stuffed it with the earth and you put the barbed wire, and you could create buildings. And so for us at our home, you can see this naughty looking pigeon in the middle with 3 sunflowers behind. Those pigeons have absolutely taken over the back of our house. They like it because we grow all these plants. My mother has a beautiful balcony there full of plants. They love it. They go and they eat 3 doors down, but they come and they live at our place. They nest, they poop, they make more babies, they nest, they poop, and they make more babies. And they're very aggressive about us being in their space. Nevertheless, when the time came to consider growing things, I realized that this pigeon sat on the railing directly above my plant pots. So fertilizer was free. So there was something there. It was already there. The blessing. I didn't even have to make this. On the top right-hand side is a pigeon tower that also I was lucky enough to go to in Iran, where they would make huge tall towers in the area of Isfahan for all the pigeons who nest in all these little cubbies here. They go in through the top, so they're completely safe. And every now and then the farmer goes through a door at the bottom and collects all this precious fertilizer, this guano, and spreads it on the melon fields, or did. They don't use them now, but they have them as antique, places to visit. So here in London, if we can find a way just to entice the pigeons to sit in the places we want them, have all this free fertilizer. So everything we need is probably right here. It is right here. We have to believe it. Like Job. Job never gave up his faith in God, or in whatever we want to call it, in that unitary principle. And eventually, he was healed. And so my formula is also to never give up and always to seek out focus, and to be thankful. Most of all, to be thankful, and to keep learning, and to remember. For me, I remember the word philosophia, and the fact that Pythagoras said that he wasn't a philosopher, because he said, I am just a philosophos. I'm just a lover of wisdom. I haven't got there, but I'm learning. So thank you for listening. I hope it's been entertaining. There we go. Thank you. You see the thankfulness? One beetroot came out of those pots, along with quite a lot of mint and the sunflowers, which didn't produce seeds, but they were beautiful. And some onions and spinach leaves, things like that. And on the other side is a ceramic dome, for which also one must be thankful. You see, they were cheap, the cheapest bricks, and then some glazed material, and then that I was following the example of Nader Khalili to try my own hand at working with a team, of course, people who knew how to fire ceramic dome. That was in India. On the bottom is the Rumi dome at Calais, which Nader Khalili had many wonderful quotes from Rumi, one of which says, in this earth, I'll say it in Farsi first, so I'll say the last part so you can understand the English. It says, darin khak, darin mazra'e pak, be jaz mehr, be jaz ishq, degar takhm nakarim. In this earth, in this immaculate field, we shall not plant any seeds except for compassion, except for love. These were beautiful words of Rumi.